This is Will Tchakirides interviewing Clayton Mercer for the HBCU Radio Preservation Project. It is 10:08 a.m. on Thursday, April 18th, 2024. This interview is being recorded at WRVS Studios at Elizabeth City State University in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. All right, Clay. And may I call you Clay for this interview?
You definitely can.
Okay. I want you to state your full name, for the record, full birth name, and then tell me what your current role is in HBCU radio.
Sure. Full name is Clayton Mercer, and my current position here at WRVS-FM 89.9 is Program Director.
Thank you. So we're going to take it back to the beginning, Clay.
Sure.
I want you to tell me when and where you were born, and a little bit about the place that you grew up in.
Nice. Born in 1979, in the month of October, the day before Halloween. Born here in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. This has pretty much been my home from day one.
Okay, and I want you to tell me what, from your childhood memories, how would you describe Elizabeth City? What sticks out?
The fact that in the very beginning especially, everyone knew each other. When we talk about community, it seemed like you knew the neighbor, but you also knew the person who was a block away or 2 blocks away. And if you saw someone at a store, they knew who you were and you knew who they were. The small community, that town feel, when we talk about Elizabeth City, that word may trip you up a little bit, that city word, because it's always felt like a small town.
All right, tell me who your parents were, or the folks who raised you, their full names, and what did they do for a living or during the day?
My mother, Ms. Margaret Mercer, and my grandmother, Geraldine Mercer, were the 2 most prolific people who helped raise me. And they were the type of people who were loving, and they were always hardworking. That's one of the things that they did. And they were housekeepers. They were people who kind of made sure that everything was taken care of at different places, businesses and homes alike.
And were there families from the region as well, or did they move in from anywhere else?
They were from the region as well. I don't know specifically too much of the background of before them, but I know that a lot of the family members were all right around the northeastern North Carolina, Hampton Roads area.
What can you tell me about the Northeast North Carolina and Hampton Roads area, maybe in terms of its demographics or the type of work that people do or what drives business or industry in the area?
I think it's one of the issues that we've dealt with, attempting to find ways to keep people in northeastern North Carolina. A lot of people who live in this area have always traveled up to Virginia to work. But people love living in this area, and I think it's because of that small town feel. It's a great place for you to raise your children. It's a great place for you to have them run outside, whether you have a fence in the backyard or not. They have something to do other than playing video games, and that's what I love about northeastern North Carolina. The small town feel is something that sticks with you. I've been able to travel, and I think a lot of people who are from this area who have traveled to big cities and places, they always have an affection to come back to northeastern North Carolina. Just something that grabs you and holds on to you.
Tell me a bit about your time as a child coming up. What did you like to do for fun? Did you listen to music at all? Did you play sports? What was your life like as a young person growing up?
I think it's kind of normal. I don't think I had anything that was abnormal. I love sports. I played basketball and ran track and enjoyed those sports. I enjoyed baseball and all other sports too. I think growing up in this area, again, you just know everybody, so you always felt comfortable everywhere you are, regardless of what school you were in. And coming up in school, I was definitely a part of sports. Music was always a part of my life. It was something that my mother and grandmother, they would always play music from the 70s. It was always the music of the funk music, the gospel music. And then I grew into the pop and understanding rock music and going independent. I had the opportunity as a child to explore, and they allowed me to do that. And that was one of the most beneficial parts of being raised in this area and my mother and grandmother allowed me to explore, and so music was always a part of my life. Radio was always a part of my life.
Yeah, what stations were on in the house?
Goodness. WGAI, which was a station here in Elizabeth City, mostly played gospel music, and I remember my mom and grandmother sitting around the radio in the evening time, right before midnight, listening to some of their favorite gospel music. I was probably asleep as a kid, but at nighttime they would be listening to WGAI and honestly WRVS. This is one of the stations that when I was a child or when I was a kid growing up, I would call into this radio station and make requests. I thought radio was fascinating, and WRVS was a part of that even then.
Did you have a favorite show when you were a child that you called into?
I don't think so. I think I just listened to the evening show, and they were playing R&B and they were playing hip-hop. And I remember there was just one song that I was enjoying the most, and I would call up and ask them to play it, and they would play it within 20 to 30 minutes. I would hear the song, and that was fascinating to me, the fact that you can have an impact immediately. I want to hear a song, and they play it. It was something about that just intrigued me.
It's a fundamental relationship between the listener and the DJ.
I think so, and it continues on. And I think that's part of what drew me into radio broadcasting, that impact that you have immediately on the listener.
And we're going to get there. Tell me a bit more about your mother and grandmother. Were they religious or spiritual people?
They were. We grew up in the church, grew up in a Methodist church, Christian beliefs. The one thing that they did not do, and I'm so happy that they did not, was force it on me. I remember going to church, and a lot of people have this story of going to church Sunday and then Monday and Tuesday, and you show up on Wednesday. I had a little bit of that, but they allowed me to be free, and they didn't really press any type of religion on me. So I can say that we were religious. We believed in a higher power, and again, I think that is an important part of who I became, who I've become at this point.
How would you describe the people who raised you's politics and how they engaged with the world socially? Were there issues that mattered to them?
I didn't really recognize that. That was something, I don't want to say it was held from me. I don't think it was something that was put forth to me to understand politics. My family, especially my mother and grandmother, who I continue to go to, voting wasn't something that was brought up as I was growing up. As I grew, I understood the importance of voting and the people who fought hard for us to vote, how important it became to vote. But early on, it wasn't something that was either taught or told to me the importance of doing so.
Can you remember any sort of either natural events that took place or political events or anything in the community in Elizabeth City when you were coming up, going through high school perhaps? Was there anything that gripped to the attention of this community here?
That was an interesting one.
Maybe something that brought people together in a particular way to address something.
I recall times growing up in Currituck County, there was always local issues that were being dealt with that brought the county together, and whether that was ways of building infrastructure. And again, going back to that point of trying to keep people in the county, to keep the money in the county, what businesses needed to be brought in, how difficult was that going to be? Those were conversations I recall as a youngster that not only were informative, but they were exciting because you felt the county growing. And obviously Currituck County right now is one of the fastest growing counties in North Carolina, I think in the entire state. But those conversations started early. So when you talk about businesses that needed to come in, those were what the community would have meetings and come together and speak about. And those were the ones that I remember the most growing up.
And you can draw on your experience in radio since, but what role does an HBCU radio station like WRVS play in communicating information about what's happening in a county or in terms of offering a forum for people to discuss issues?
Use the right word. I think we allowed people to use we created a forum and a media. We allowed people to use radio to express their feelings and express their opinions and express their thoughts. I thought radio was so important for that because it was a medium that you didn't have to pay for. You really didn't have to search too far. You just had to get into your vehicle, turn it on, and at the specific times that you needed to hear the information, this radio station was able to provide it. The great thing about it is it wasn't just about Elizabeth City. It was about the 21 county region that we kind of do our best to cover. But when we talk about 21 counties, we talk about northeastern North Carolina. We wanted to make sure that everyone in the area understood that this is an open forum, and we're going to be as trustworthy, as truthful, and as unbiased as we possibly can be.
What schools did you attend in the area? I want you to name them if you can, and tell me what some of your favorite subjects were and what you liked to do in school.
Started off at Currituck County, obviously, at Moyock Elementary School. Started off with Head Start there and went all the way through 6th grade. After I went there, we moved to the middle school, which was J.P. Knapp at the time in Currituck County, and then moved, obviously, to the high school of Currituck County High School. And then I made my way to college here at Elizabeth City State. And what was the next part of that question? I'm sorry.
What were your favorite subjects?
Favorite subjects throughout the entire time was English, and I never understood why. One of my worst subjects was math, and I figured out later in life that English just made more sense to me than math did. I understood plus and minus and division, but as soon as you saw the number with a letter next to it, I blew my mind. I said, math is not for me. So English was something that I gravitated to, especially in elementary school. I kind of noticed that I enjoyed reading books. I enjoyed being in the library. I could be there all day, whether it was looking through books, magazines, newspapers. I loved history. I liked looking at past events. Even if I knew what the past event happened, what happened at the past event, I was caught up in reading about it and seeing if I can find more information about it. So I knew English was something that I enjoyed, and English was probably my favorite subject all the way through school.
And you ended up studying it in college?
Yes. When I got to Elizabeth City State University, my major was in English, and I had a minor in mass communication. So I understood once I made my way to college, I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to be a sports reporter, sports broadcaster. And then all of a sudden in college, I started to kind of gravitate a little bit more toward the radio side, and both of those were able to come together here at WRVS.
Any favorite writers, or perhaps even sports writers, who inspired you as a writer?
Wow, I've always enjoyed John Grisham. The way that he writes, the way that he paints the picture. Some of the books that I've read from him, I enjoy him. There's several others, but he's one that comes to mind of one of those that I said, let me get into more of his novels and just kind of, I would want to write like him just because of the way that he expresses the scene and makes you feel it just from his words.
Okay, I want to get to Elizabeth City State, but first, what are the racial demographics like in this community, in this county, in this region of North Carolina? Give me a sense of who's here. Class backgrounds, ethnicity.
I wish I could say. I think middle class, mostly in this area. African American, I think, is a little bit more predominant. When you look at the people who are obviously here at ECSU, you kind of see more diversity now than we did when I was in school. Because when we say HBCU, historically black colleges and universities, obviously you expect to be more amongst African Americans or black people. That started to change a little bit here, especially at ECSU, where you're starting to see more diversity. It's not just white people. You see Hispanics. You see more people who are coming in. And I think that is a major positive for HBCUs in general.
When do you see that shift taking place throughout your career?
I think I noticed it more so. I think I noticed it when I came back. So I stepped away, obviously, when I graduated in 2002. When I stepped away and I came back, I kind of saw it gradually happen. But when I returned here to WRVS in 2012, I kind of started to see different people walking through the door of this radio station who wanted to be a part of what we do. And I applauded that. I was very happy to see it.
Okay, so you made the choice to stay local and attend an HBCU. What went into that decision? Did you visit other HBCU campuses? What made you want to be at this particular university?
There were two things. One of them was family. Being from Currituck County and being from this area, this was pretty much home. I didn't want to go too far away because I didn't know what college was about. So I wanted to be close to home. And basketball. this was a Division II school in the CIAA conference who embraced me, and I had chances to go to several other places, PWIs, but the recruiting process, the family feel that I had here at ECSU, and the fact that I was not too far away from home, it was just a beautiful marriage.
And did you play basketball here at ECSU?
I did. I was a scholarship 4-year basketball player here. Enjoyed my time and won the MVP of the basketball team my final year, my senior year. So I had a good career, and I learned a lot of lessons being on the basketball team outside of what you do on the basketball court.
I'm glad you said that, because I want to know, how did the lessons you learned playing basketball shape your career in radio?
Throughout my time, not only at ECSU on the basketball team, but even in high school, at Currituck County High School, playing basketball, the mentality that you have to go get it, that's where it really kicked in. And I think moving that to radio, the mission as a basketball player is always to be the best player that you can possibly be. And I was able to translate that into, I want to be the best at whatever position in radio that I take over. I want to be the best at that. And so in the very beginning with radio, it was being on the microphone, and that moved to production, and then that moved to programming. And I wanted to be the best at all of that, and I think my ambition to be the best on the basketball court translated very well to radio.
And as a basketball player, you're traveling across the conference. You're going to St. Aug's, you're going to Shaw, you're going to Winston-Salem, Fayetteville State, Claflin, all around the region. Mm-hmm. How does that network, that athletic network within HBCU, compare to the radio network within HBCU? Is it a similar dynamic? What's different about that sort of networking between these institutions?
I think it's very similar. I think when you look at what we were able to do, and you talked about regionally, that being on the basketball team here at ECSU was my first time getting on a plane. We went to places like Alabama and went to Georgia. But when you talk specifically about the connection with some of the other schools like Shaw and St. Augustine's and Fayetteville States and some of those schools, within radio and HBCU, we've been able to network with other HBCUs that have radio stations. And I made that a point to make sure that we were able to do that. There was a period of time where I established a conference that we would do yearly that would bring together radio stations at other HBCU campuses.
Oh, what was that called?
It was called the College Radio Video Conference. I had to kind of put all of that together. And we did it for a few years, and it was really me just researching, okay, what HBCUs have radio stations that are terrestrial. I wanted to make sure that they were terrestrial and that they were connecting the students and giving them the training that they needed, because I wanted our students here at WRVS to kind of feel and understand what other radio stations at HBCUs were going through and what they were dealing with on a regular basis. And we reached out to several schools, and there were very, very informative conversations about everything from fundraising to daily operations to growth as far as programming and what you do on air, to how to get out into the community a lot better, to even the money that it costs to operate. We even got into those conversations to operate a radio station. And I think the students who were a part of those conferences really gained a lot of knowledge, and I think it also was eye-opening to them so they can understand not only do they go through some of the same situations at other places, but here at WRVS, you have it a lot better than some of these other HBCU radio stations.
Yeah, so you're suggesting within HBCU radio stations that there are pressing concerns, whether it's around resourcing or money or how you're connecting with the community to make sure you get that buy-in. So why does it matter that you're setting up a conference like this within HBCU radio? Why is this so significant?
The camaraderie, and I think you talked about it just a moment ago as far as that connection, that networking. That's what I wanted to grow. I wanted the other radio stations to understand that we are a resource to you also. There are going to be times where other college radio stations, HBCUs specifically, may not have the manpower to get certain things done. Well, that's what I wanted to do with the conference. I wanted you to understand that there are other radio stations that have the ability to assist you, especially in the fact that you're not in our market. So we're not competing. We actually can come together and we can work together to make your station sound great, to make your station run the way it needs to, And your information that you give to us only makes us all better. I wanted to really grow that camaraderie.
And about what year are you establishing this?
This was actually back, if I can remember correctly, I think this was 2015, I believe. 2015 or 2016. It was one of those that we started doing it.
That's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take it back to your undergraduate career.
Sure.
Did you end up pledging?
I did not. No.
And why or why not? What went into that decision?
Anybody asks that question, I always tell them that I pledged basketball. Basketball, just as a scholarship ball player, it takes up so much of your time. And I know that may sound like a cop-out, but it really is not, because you want, again, that aspiration to be the best that you can possibly be. So in the off season, you're working hard to get ready for the next season. When you combine what I did on the basketball court and then the time that I put in here at the radio station, I just didn't really have the time, or really at that time just didn't have the interest to pledge.
What was that first homecoming like on campus? What did it feel like? What did you see around you? Did you feel a part of something?
At that time, I was already working with the radio station when the first homecoming came around, and there were events that the radio station needed to be a part of. So I believe I had a little bit more. Behind the scenes of homecoming than other students who are in their freshman year enjoying their first homecoming. Mesmerizing was what I took from it. When I first made my way on campus that first year, 1998 in August, compared to what we dealt with in October when the alums came back, and you just saw the crowds show up for every event that we did, it's a much different atmosphere then than what it is now.
How so?
There was a little bit more freedom than what we're dealing with right now. And as far as the alums that came on campus, you just saw them at their plots for the fraternities and sororities, cooking good food. You was able to kind of go over there and grab a little something for free. That was something I had never felt before, never seen it. Of course, those areas have been here on campus for a pretty long time, but that first time where you see it populated by so many brothers and sisters from the fraternities and sororities, you just feel, and they would embrace you. And I just enjoyed so many events outside of, the concerts and everything that we did. The football game, we were working that football game. I was a sports broadcaster at the time. I did play-by-play, and I had a color commentary person with me. And so we were able to travel with the football team, and I had to kind of do the sports broadcasting for that. And just the energy that you felt inside Roebuck Stadium is just a difference at homecoming than any other game that you play for the football season.
That's really cool. Any broadcasters you're trying to emulate as you're going on the job doing the play-by-play?
Oh, man, that was
inspiration.
A dream of mine. I would, and I don't want to single anybody out, but obviously you look at television, and I listen to radio. Woody Durham was somebody that and I'm a Tar Heel fan, and I've always enjoyed his radio broadcast and the way that he painted the picture. So I had an idea of what I needed to do on the radio side, and I knew that I wanted to be a play-by-play person. I knew this growing up as a youngster, playing Nintendo and playing PlayStation. I would play the video games, and the majority of the time they would be basketball games. I would play the games and turn the sound down just a little bit, and I would commentate as I'm playing the game. And if I hit a big shot, I would run over to my radio and I would have sound effects. And I would play the song that needed to be played, or I would play the crowd cheering, which again, you would have that in the game. But I would do the broadcasting side of it as I'm playing the video game. And I loved it. And I did it all the time. I don't know if it annoyed my mom and them. I don't know. But regardless, they allowed me to do it. And I knew I had an affection for play-by-play or color commentary, sports broadcasting. I knew I had an affection for that. And I'm happy that WRVS allowed me to just, go into that almost immediately.
I love it.
I remember the game and everything. Bulls versus Lakers. I was playing that. The NCAA basketball, I would just be playing. It was just fun. So,
what were your English courses like? Are there any particular professors who you want to shout out or that inspired you? Or any favorite courses, maybe?
there's one that comes to mind, and I'm trying to remember. There were so many professors here on the campus of ECSU, and we call him KB, but Kip Branch comes to mind. He was one of those guys that challenged you. And when I came to ECSU and he became my professor, he challenged me to step outside the box. He always told us to try to read a newspaper every day. And I like reading newspapers, but I didn't really understand the motive behind it. But he didn't want you to just read one newspaper. He wanted you to read 2 or 3 newspapers, especially if there was a story. He wanted you to get the perspective, not just that one perspective, but get your second and third perspective, gather all the information you possibly could, and then come up with your own perspective, come up with your own truth. He did a lot of that. He did a lot of challenging me, and I think a lot of people who went through his course here at ECSU will remember KB for what he provided, and some of those lessons that he taught continue to stay with me to this day.
What newspapers are you reading with KB? What I'm wondering is there a black press in the area here, or what are the newspapers that service this area?
I don't want to say black press, but I do want to say that social media has exploded, obviously, and a lot of what we used to do with newspapers, they've done it now on social media, where they're able to gather news and present that news on social media. But at the time when I was reading newspapers, it was always from the USA Today's all the way down, obviously, to the Virginia Pilots and the Daily Advances of the world, the local newspapers. But he wanted us to kind of aspire to go outside of that. So that's where the USA Today's come in, and the Washington Post and those newspapers that we were able to kind of had access to, and were able to read different stories from different perspectives.
Okay, so tell me, what's being played on WRVS when you're a student, and tell me the story of how you got involved at the station here.
So again, it all, I guess, started when I was a child and calling into the radio station. I was just so excited that there was a local radio station that you could call into and make requests of music that you wanted to hear. And through high school, obviously, I was still into radio. But once I got here in August of '98, at that time, the radio station was playing different types. We were playing gospel, we were playing hip-hop, we were playing R&B. That was kind of the music of the time. And it continued on throughout my entire time here as an undergrad here at ECSU. We continued with gospel, R&B, and hip-hop. Those were the 3 genres of music that we played. There was a period of time where the radio station became jazzy, 89.9, and it turned into jazz music. So then it incorporated jazz, and that was controversial.
How so?
Only because you understand that jazz music is not the most popular for the students here on the campus. And we worried about that. We thought about it for a moment. We said, well, we understand hip hop and R&B are the most requested songs, and the students are the most popular to them. And then when it changed to Jazzy 89.9, we knew jazz music was not going to be something that students wanted to hear. The interesting part about that is with Jazzy 89.9, the student participation didn't go down. And that was very surprising to me. I don't know what everyone else who was a part of that, but it was surprising to me. And I didn't have an issue with it because it was another genre of music that I could gain some knowledge from. And we still incorporated hip-hop. So even as Jazzy 89.9, throughout the day it was mostly jazz, mostly R&B. But in the evening, we still kept that hip-hop in the evening time because we understood we still needed that student component, and we knew that a lot of students may not want to play jazz music. And I think that might have helped us out a little bit.
Who was the station manager at the time?
At the time, the station manager was Edith Thorpe. She was the general manager at the time when I came in.
And tell me, when you came in, who were your mentors?
I get into a lot of them, actually. I took to, and she may not even know this, but there was a lady named Kimberly Pierce, who was now Kimberly Pierce Cartwright. And I gravitated toward her because when she was doing community affairs and doing news, the effort that she put in, the prep work that she put in to make sure that everything she did on air was ready to go, it was just precise. And I recognize that about her, the effort that she put in, the mentality of the more prep work you do, the better you'll be on air. I took that from her very, very early. And so she was one. I think one of the other, Lolithia, D.L. Underdew, was another person here. At the time, she was the music director here at the radio station. She also had an on-air show. And I enjoyed her liveliness. Regardless of how her day was going, when she got on the microphone, you wouldn't know how her day was. You just felt like she was having a good day and a smile from ear to ear all the time. And she loved what she does. She loved what she did with the music, and she loved her job here at WRVS, and I felt that. And so she was another one. Greg Sampson, obviously a lot of people will have a lot of good conversations about what he was able to bring to the table. He was just a jack of all trades. That was the thing about Greg. He could be on air. He could do production. He was in the community, and that was what I gained from him, the community aspect. People were actually asking for him to be a part of their weddings, whether it was DJing or just using his voice. And he had a wonderful voice. He had a voice that was not specific to a genre. And even to this day, I'm still working to try to make sure that I do not have a voice that is just specifically for hip-hop or specifically for R&B. Greg had that voice that could cross genres. Those were the few that came to mind.
Did you work with Dorothy Keith at all?
For a little bit of time, I did. Dorothy Keith, who was the gospel coordinator or the gospel director and Morning Joy. She was the one who kind of built it and created it and grew it to where it is today. Dorothy Keith, every time I had interaction with her, it was loving. There was not a time that I recall being in front of Miss Dorothy Keith where even she was having a bad day. She always embraced you, was always willing to show you something. If you asked her a question, she was always willing to show you. She was one of the people that, again, when you talk about that family atmosphere, she was a major part of that. She was able to bring you in and talk with you. I didn't have to. She was obviously, as I'm a student, she, doing what she was doing for us at the station in the mornings. I did really have a lot of interaction with her as far as her show goes, but outside of her show, we would have some fun conversations.
From the public affairs side or the news side or engaging with the community, what issues do you recall the station covering during that time when you were a student? And I mean, you're talking late 90s into the early 2000s, so you intersect with 9/11 and some really, really important times. So I'm curious what the station was covering back then.
You bring up 9/11, that hit me. I recall when that took place, and I was trying to figure out, and immediately my mind went to radio for some reason. But at that time, I think with the community affairs, we were much more in tune to what was happening politically here in the area. I kind of noticed that. And again, Kimberly Pierce, Cartwright, was right on it. She was always engaged with the mayor or whoever that needed to have. If we needed to bring a person on to speak, she knew who that person was. And I love the fact that she was able to kind of connect politically with the area, what the climate was, especially when it comes to voting, but more so about the school systems.
Tell me more about that.
She was really interested, and not only her, we've had other people who have done some community work with us, but that community portion of what the school systems were dealing with, superintendents that would come and go, what the students, not only the students, but what the parents were dealing with within the school systems, whether they were dealing with a lot of the students who may have not been able to get the teaching that they wanted, and parents always want their students to get the best teaching. Sometimes we would deal with issues of the quality of what the schools were providing. We were able to bring that to the air in forums. We were able to create forums and have a person sit across from whoever the host was, have that dialogue on air for 30 minutes, and within that 30 minutes, open up the phone lines and let people speak. And I thought that was really profound, that people had, again, the medium of radio allowing them to have a voice. And that's why we call ourselves Your Community Voice, because we want to give the people of this area a voice that they may not have, because You look at Elizabeth City, there's not many TV stations. There's not that much media. That's why we're so vital, I think, to this area.
Yeah, so you're getting to a big question that we have for this entire project is, what does it mean to do radio at an HBCU station? Why is it significant? Why is it so important that these communities have a voice in that way?
I think because they wouldn't have a voice otherwise. They're just as important as the places that do have 5 or 6 TV stations, or the place that does have several radio stations that can get the information out there. We always talk about the differences between terrestrial and some of the other outlets that provide music, whether that's satellite radio or whether that's Spotify or any of these other places. Well, when you have a radio station that is in the community, on HBCU campus especially, certain other places will not get the perspectives that we can get because we're right here in it. And I think that's where terrestrial radio and college radio, especially HBCU radio, that's where we have a leg up, so to speak.
And you were a student DJ. Did you have a name for your shows or anything like that? Was there a particular name?
So on air, my name on air was C Nice. And the late KB, Kit Branch, would always joke me about that. So C Nice was the name. That's not too it's not too
threatening.
It's not at all. And obviously not too much thought put into it. C Nice just came and went, so it was kind of nice. And I don't recall what the show was that I had, but I had a weekend show, and that weekend show was about 2 hours, and it was a show that it presented music from back in the day.
When is back in the day? Yeah.
So the music that I presented, I would say it went back to maybe in the 70s, from the 70s and 80s, which is kind of what my show is. It transformed into what my show is now. But I had a show on the weekends. It was on Saturdays. That was a kind of a countdown of music from then. And that was kind of my show. That was my show that was given to me, and I enjoyed that music, so it was easy to do.
Who are some of the artists that stick out?
Stephanie Mills was one. Teddy Pendergrass. You talk about the Temptations. You would play that music. I think that, and those are the songs. And when you listen to those artists, the OJs, my mom used to listen to this. Mm-hmm. So obviously it connected with me, and it was easy for me to present that to the listener because that's what I grew up with.
So there's kind of an intergenerational piece to this.
I think so. Very much so.
And so you were a student. What described the importance of student training to HBCU radio as sort of a training ground?
The training part was vital because there were so many students that had an idea of what radio is and was, but they didn't understand the mechanisms of how it made its way to the ear of the listener. What is it we go through? There's so many people that listen to the radio and think we just play music all day. At that time, where there was cart machines or DATs or CDs, as time went on, reel to reel, they figured we just pushed a button, the song would play, and then we push another button and the next song would play. They wouldn't understand the work that goes into actually getting that music out to the people. The training that you receive at a HBCU radio station, a college radio station overall, allows you to pretty much see the nuts and bolts, whether that comes to the equipment that is used, which is so vital, obviously, but also your presentation on air. Not everyone can get on the microphone and just talk for 3 or 4 hours or 2 hours or 1 hour, whatever it may be. That's where the training comes in. How do you grow that radio personality on air? You don't want to be an on-air personality? That's okay. You can become a board operator. How do you work the board? What is NPR? What is that? How does that get onto the radio? Well, that's where your engineering comes in, and you kind of understand that part of it, of why we have a satellite, why we have some of the lights and sound effects that you hear in another room to be able to get that music to. What I've noticed is students who go through the training, they come in with the idea of what they see on TV and what they hear on radio with the Steve Harveys and the Elvis Durans and all of this. They see the beautiful picture that shows. But when they understand the growth of what it takes to get there, you see their eyes open up. And that excites me.
Thank you. Is that the mission of WRVS? How would you describe WRVS's mission?
I think there are two. I think one mission is to, actually I will say three. There are two missions. There are three missions that I can think of, three. Number one, that is training. I think it is important to train the students who are interested in radio broadcasting, to let them touch the equipment hands-on, to let them feel what radio is. It's not just playing music, what else goes into being a wonderful radio station. That is very important. I think number two, to tell the narrative of Elizabeth City State University. It's one of the things that our chancellor has always talked about, whether that's Chancellor Dixon, even previous chancellors have talked about, don't let other people tell your story. We can tell our story because we know it best. And she's allowed us to do that. And I give Chancellor Dixon so much credit for allowing us to be the radio station that we need to be. Within that, there's also the recruiting side of it. We want to help ECSU recruit students here. And I think what the music that we play and what we do as far as radio and being in the community, I think it's a recruiting tool. Students, prospective students, parents, they see WRVS, they see Elizabeth City State University, and it might be the cool thing that brings a student to the university. And the more students, the better for all of us. But I also believe serving the community and being that voice is the other thing. We are in a very interesting position here at Elizabeth City because part of our signal travels into the Hampton Roads area. And you talk about Hampton Roads, they've got a plethora of commercial and non-commercial radio stations. But in this area of northeastern North Carolina, as we talked about before, there's not that much media. So Elizabeth City State University has a radio station that is 41,000 watts currently and will be growing very soon. It's vital to have that voice and to serve the community with the music, the news, the information that we can provide.
And thank you. Tell me a bit about your post-undergraduate career trajectory, the different places that you have worked, and if you can, the different roles that you've had coming up through WRVS.
In the very beginning, when I made it to the radio station, I wanted to do sports broadcasting, but I thought that I was going to be the best on-air person in the world. I was going to be that person that was going to make my way to New York. I'm going to get to wherever I wanted to go at that time, I was going to be number one. As I made my way through WRVS and continuing to be on air, I fell in love with production. And I bring up DL, Valethia Underdew, for a reason, because she is the first person that recognized that production is where you're going to be a star. And at the time I told her, no, that's not true. There's no way in the world. I'm going to be on air. I'm going to be the voice of everything. But within a month or two, I had to give her credit because production, I fell in love with it, even more so than the on air. It was just production and being able to create sounds that impacted listeners when they heard it, whether that was a concert promo or some commercial, whatever it may be, the impact that it had on the listeners. Once I graduated from Elizabeth City State University, just before that, I had an internship at a radio station in Virginia Beach. It was a station that was from the ground up. When I made my way there, I was able to, my senior year here at ECSU, I was able to attain a internship there. And I remember traveling from Northeast North Carolina to Virginia Beach every day. And again, that was my love for radio. And I wanted to learn, but to be a part of a station that was there was boxes on the floor in the lobby. It was just starting, and I was able to be a part of that growth. At the time, it was the radio station that's now defunct. It was WWHV in Virginia Beach. It was a hip-hop radio station, and they gave me an internship. That internship grew into a full-time position. About a month after I graduated here from ECSU, I had a professional full-time job at that station in Virginia Beach as a production director. And that grew as my time continued on. I was able to move from Virginia Beach and begin working in the Washington, D.C. area at a radio station called WPGC-FM. And that station allowed me to grow and gain networking. We talked about networking before, but a guy named Skip Dillard, who is currently in the New York market, he's worked at so many radio stations. He was my program director at the time at PGC. I gained so much knowledge from him about the way that he programmed radio stations, the way that he presented radio, it was light years ahead of anything that I had seen previously. And I've worked with a lot of people. I can obviously say Skip was someone. Steve Hegwood is another one who I worked with his company. WWHV was a part of his company, and his programming prowess from his time working with Radio 1 and moving on to owning his own radio stations now and his own company. But he had that go-getter mentality. He just knew that he was good, and being able to kind of learn a little bit from him. And, I've had a lot of great teachers all the way through. And once I left PGC...
Does that stand for Prince George's County?
It does, yeah.
And did you live in that area when you were up there?
I did. I spent a little bit. When I was there, I stayed in the Maryland area.
What was different about Maryland versus North Carolina? What did you notice?
Oh, there was a lot. So let's talk about that for a minute. The first thing I noticed, and you can even say Virginia Beach, there was a difference. When I made my way to the D.C. area, the speed and the time sensitivity of things that needed to get done. There was no slowdown. And, you move into a top 10 market at the time, and you understand that time sensitive, meaning that if there was something that needed to be done by 4 p.m., it needed to be done by 4 p.m. Not only that, but the amount of the volume of work that needed to be done, it grew substantially moving into that area. It's just a much more fast pace than Virginia Beach or obviously Elizabeth City. I enjoyed it for what it was, and to be able to come from there and then to return back to Elizabeth City, you want to bring some of that back, and especially for the students to feel, but also for the radio station. You want them to have a bigger sense of urgency, and I think we've been able to attain that.
And then you come back to Elizabeth City. What have been your roles at this station?
When I returned to Elizabeth City, first, I came in as a production director. This was in 2012 when I returned. December of 2011 was when I returned, and then I started to do production director and on-air host of the afternoon show. And
what does a production director do?
So the production director pretty much translates the ideas and the sound that the radio station wants to present. We are the curators of what you hear. So we are the bells and the whistles. We create those bells and whistles and make sure that they are presented. We edit the music, we edit the sounds, we create commercials, we do the promos, and any kind of recordings that need to be done within the radio station, whether that is an artist that comes into the station and we need to get some audio from them, the production director makes sure that that audio is clear and is ready to go for whatever uses we need it to what they need it to be.
And is that your current role?
That is not. So I moved from production director and on-air host, and I took over as program director, and still doing a lot of production, but as a program director and still on-air host. So the on-air host side has stayed with me since 2012, but I moved from production to programming.
Yeah, you've had a show here for quite a bit. Tell me the name of that show and what the content of it is and what your vision for it is, man.
So in 2011, as I was making my way back here in December 2011, I wanted to create a show that was different from everything that you was hearing. And at the time, I had to think about Northeastern North Carolina, and I thought about Hampton Roads. And then after I thought about those two areas, I said, well, what is not really being heard on radio stations in the country? And so I created Afternoon Delight Radio Show. And that radio show, I knew there was an area of music that was not being presented on radio. That's the 90s, that's New Jack Swing, and that music was not being played. I always say that I was doing throwbacks before they created the word throwbacks, and that was in 2012 when the radio show started, in January of 2012 when I started that show. I didn't hear anything about throwback radio until a couple of years later. So I always feel like I was in the beginning of what throwback radio became. But when I created Afternoon Delight Radio Show in 2012, it was really to service the people who loved 90s music. Of course, I would dip into the 80s because I think the 90s and the 80s kind of coincide with, especially the R&B side of it. So I always called it 80s, 90s, and New Jack Swing because there's a difference between all of that. I didn't want to just be R&B. I also wanted to play some of the 90s music that you enjoyed, whether that was music that was outside of R&B, and I wanted to make sure that I had a platform to be able to present that music. Not only did I want to play songs from Aaliyah and New Edition and all of that, I wanted to play Robert Palmer. I wanted to play NXS. I wanted to play those songs because that's what I like too. And so I felt like people wanted to hear that music. And not only that, I wanted to make sure that when I played these songs, that I'm not just playing songs that you heard on the radio all day. I wanted to play some B-sides. I wanted to play some songs from the album that I know you liked, but they didn't make a video for it, or they didn't make it as a single. But I know you liked it, so I'm going to play it. And the feedback that I received, getting calls from, I remember getting calls from Richmond. I remember getting calls from Virginia Beach. I remember getting calls from Greenville. People were just hearing this music. And I said, okay, I'm on to something here. And obviously, when you hear all of these throwback radio stations, I guess I was on to something at that time.
Wow. You're speaking to my earliest musical memories, my earliest consciousness of music, thinking about New Jack Swing and that time in the late 80s, early 90s there.
People love that. And it's so phenomenal to hear people continue to go back to that music now, whether they're sampling the music to create songs that people of this generation think is new, and then you play a song from back then, it's like, no, this is where it started from. I love doing that also, but when you say things like you just said, that's why I do the show, because I want people to be able to live, whether they were in college, high school, wherever they were at that time. That music is timeless.
I'm going to move us towards the end here, but I want to know, what is your proudest accomplishment in HBCU radio, and what do you want your legacy to be, when you're no longer on mic?
My legacy, I can start there before I go back. My legacy, I just want people, when they look back at my career, to understand that you can do it all. You don't have to be stuck in a box. If you want to learn various aspects of radio, you can, and you can apply it and be successful. Doesn't matter if you're in the top 10 market, top 100 market, 300, 400 market, doesn't matter. If you can take this radio broadcasting and you can show up every day and it doesn't feel like a job, I want you to understand the love of radio broadcasting. And that's the way it is for me. I come in here and it's not a job. This is fun. This is something people ask me, what do you do for fun? This is what I do for fun.
Is it establishing that culture that you're most proud of, you think, or is it something else?
I think establishing that culture is a major part of it. Every student that comes through these doors while I am here, I want them to not feel like they just have to do their shift and they leave. I want them to feel as though this is a place that you can hang around, learn, and have fun at the same time. We understand the mission of the radio station, but I want you to not look at it as a job. I think that's something that you'll hear from a lot of people that you may interview who just love not only WRVS but radio, not for what it is, but even really for what it was, because we were a part of the growth of it. This is just fun. This is just love. And if this is my final job within radio broadcasting, if this is all that I do, I feel like I'm okay with that. I feel very good about it.
And what about your family life? Did you get married, have children? What is your personal life like, to the extent that you're comfortable talking about it?
Sure. I am happily married, thankfully, to a beautiful lady named Brittany. And we have 2 children together, Carter and Carson. And my oldest is outside of the marriage, but my oldest son is Amari, and he is currently here at ECSU. So as a graduate of Elizabeth City State University, it gives me a lot of pride that he's also here and looking to become a Viking.
Yeah, what does that feel like to have your son attend the same university and be a Viking like that?
It is an interesting feeling, because I understand what I went through as an undergrad, and now he's able to go through some of that. His first homecoming, his first Viking Fest, he's in the band, so he's able to kind of travel a little bit. He went to the CIAA basketball tournament in Baltimore. That was his first tournament ever, obviously with ECSU. So for him to experience all of this and then to come back and tell me how much he enjoys it and his experiences, it just makes me relive some of my time as an undergrad.
So he's playing basketball too?
He is not playing basketball. I wish, he probably would have wanted to do track more so than basketball. And as of right now, ECSU doesn't have track, but fingers crossed, hopefully they'll bring a track and field team here soon. But I think he would love to be a part of the track and field team and continue to be in sports. But I think he has a love for band right now. And I'm happy he's been able to embrace that.
Okay, for bands moving around the conference. And your wife, what does your wife do?
Oh, my wife, she works within the medical field, and she's she works in the pharmacy area of medical. And then she's a graduate of Elizabeth City State also.
Wow. Did you meet here?
We did. We met here, and she it's so funny because she's an English major also, and so the fact that I'm an English major, she was an English major, we connected in that way, and we have a love for books. We have a love for a lot of English things. She doesn't like math either. I'm not a fan of it, so that a lot of connections when it comes to that as fellow Vikings. So yes, it's a fun. It's so fun to be able to talk about that with her, and she understands how much love I have to go into a library and how the smell of books, and that's not weird to her. I'm sorry about that. That's not weird to her, so I love that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, sure thing.
A couple closers here. So something I'm beginning to ask folks.
Yeah.
What do you think about us, right? We're coming in as the HBCU Radio Preservation Project.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that's important, that we're preserving the history of HBCU radio?
Because there is a lot of history that has not been documented,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lot of history that has not been told. You all are coming in and doing something that has been needed in the HBCU radio community for a very long time, and we don't know where radio is going to go, but at least we can preserve the rich history now. And I think that you all have come in at the right time, and you're talking to the right people. And I think this is so vital for the students in the future who may want to understand what HBCU radio and college radio is all about. This is something that I would play for them. Let them just listen to it first before we go into more conversation. I feel like this is going to be one of the most thorough presentations of HBCU radio history that's ever been done, and I'm just glad to be a part of it.
That's great. And lastly, what have we left out of this interview? Anyone important that you need to shout out, or is there an aspect of your life that you want to make sure gets on the historical record?
When you come into HBCUs and you come into radio the way that I did, I was a basketball player, and you have aspirations as a youngster that you're going to be playing professionally. You're going to the NBA, and this is just a stepping stone to get to the NBA. There's a lot more that you can accomplish. And that one dream, your plan A, should not be the only plan that you have. And I've figured that out in my time of moving from NBA is not going to be the path for me. So journalism, is that going to be the path for me? No. But there's radio. There's always a chance for you to get a plan B and a plan C. And radio not only was not plan A, but the fact that it has been the biggest plan of my life up to this point is mesmerizing. So what I like to tell people, again, never put yourself in a box and think that you only have one path in life. You have the ability, the mental capacity to do so much. And radio isn't going anywhere. It may change in various aspects. Radio has grown, and radio continues to change as it needs to and transform. And we can talk about so many different forms of radio, but I think with everything, when it comes to social media, when it comes to YouTube video, whatever it may be, all we're doing is incorporating that into radio broadcasting and continuing to build radio broadcasting and make sure that it stays here for years to come. And I'm just happy to have been part of that growth here at WRVS. And again, the students that continue to come through here, you just want to teach them everything you can. So again, there's so much growth within radio, and there's so much growth within HBCUs. This is just a part of it.
That's really powerful and well said. And we are just about at time, so if there's nothing else to add, I'm going to thank you very much for speaking with us today at the HBCU Radio Preservation Project, and I wish you the best of luck on your future endeavors in radio.
Thank you for all you are doing, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
Thank you.